Hello, 8th grade U.S. history students. Welcome to week 4. We're going to be doing some content exploration today, specifically on the southern and northern colonies. The northern colonies are also called the New England colonies. You can see them here. They're in red on the map right here. Those are the New England colonies. We're going to be looking at those versus the southern colonies, which are here in yellow. And these are the southern colonies down here. And in particular, we're going to be asking this week's big question, why did the colonies of the North and the South develop so differently from each other? Let's also look at the standard real quickly. We're going to be doing a place and identity standard, which looks at the physical characteristics of a place, such as its geography, like the rivers, the landscape. And then how does that connect to the social characteristics or the cultural characteristics of a place or a community? So how did that help to develop the different types of communities that developed there, that were created there? Okay, and we're going to use a couple of different resources today. There is this document here that has some reading on it. I've also got this Jamboard here that I'm going to be using, and then we'll also be doing a little bit of a tour on Google Earth. So let's get into it. In this Jamboard, we have the southern colonies on the left and the northern colonies on the right. And the big ideas in terms of the geography and how that impacted the cultures are here. So in the southern colonies, we had large rivers and fertile flat land. And so here's a picture of that. They just had really large rivers that you could imagine sailing a boat, all even back in the day when they just had big sailboats. You could sail a boat all the way up into the river, no problem. And that's going to have a big impact on the types of communities that develop here. For instance, each plantation had its own dock. So this is an old plantation in Virginia. And you could see the plantation just, if they wanted to sell something, they would just load it right onto the boat. The boat would just come right up and dock next to the plantation, and they would load their tobacco or their cotton. Another part of this, and connected to the cash crops, were the fact that there was large populations of enslaved African workers, and they were producing mostly crops like tobacco and indigo and cotton that were for export. So they were going to be put on big ships and taken farther away. So that's the southern colonies, talking about the geography, right? The types of rivers and land, as well as the types of communities that developed, and the culture and the types of communities that developed. Okay, now let's take a look at the northern colonies. Big difference here in terms of the geography is that the northern colonies do not have those large rivers. They have very rocky shorelines, and they have hilly, or mountainous kind of landscape. And that's important because it means that farmers had to bring their goods to towns to trade. So you had to load up your goods into a wagon and bring it to a town like this, which is an old picture of Boston with their long wharf. This long wharf was like, I don't know, 4 football fields long, and it's got these big trading houses, and the ships would all come to one place, and all the farmers would bring their goods here. Although it wasn't just farmers, they were also very involved in small manufacturing, and actually producing rum as a part of the triangle trade. They would bring sugar up from the Caribbean. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Another part of this, though, is that the people that originally arrived were religious communities with more families and towns. And so there was, from the beginning, a very strong religious component, and that those churches became a meeting spot for the community as well. One thing to talk about real quickly before going to Google Earth, though, is even though there weren't as many enslaved laborers in the northern colonies, there still were some, or there were even enslaved Native American people. The difference was there was just a lot of smaller farms instead of these big plantations. Okay, let's head over to Google Earth. Let's see this in a couple of different ways. I want to take you on a tour of 3 locations in the historic southern colonies, mostly Virginia and Maryland, and then 3 locations in the historic northern colonies, Rhode Island and Massachusetts. But even just from the start, you can already see the difference in geography. This is the Chesapeake Bay right here. It's a really big river, and it's got really big rivers that branch off of it. Whereas up here, you can see already these kind of rocky shorelines, and it's just much colder and rockier, and so it's much harder to kind of just land a ship wherever you wanted to. Okay, so we're going to start off today. Let's see. Let me get this guy running. Um, is this my project? Nope. Back. Here's where I want to go. We're going to start with this one right here. The Jamestown Historic Ship Museum. Boom, we're zooming way into Jamestown. Jamestown was, of course, one of the very first, if not first lasting settlement, European settlement in the Americas. And this is where it occurred on the James River. And you can see there again that big river is just, you could bring a ship right up that river. And actually, this river connects back to an even larger Chesapeake Bay. And let's take a closer look. We're going to fly in there, and you can see that it's just very flat, and it was very fertile ground. Each little town, each little plantation had its own dock for loading up things. Let's take a look at some of these pictures. Yeah, that gives you a sense of what it would look like. So those are some of the types of ships that would have been there, and this is at the site of historic Jamestown. Okay, next up, how do we go to the next one? Oh, here we go. Next up, we are going to fly to a tobacco plantation not far away in Maryland. And you can see, yeah, here's where this kind of historic tobacco plantation was, and this is what it looked like. So this is kind of a small scale tobacco plantation. That's what they would have been loading up into ships to ship back to Europe. The part that I want to show you, though, is here. Even this little itty bitty tobacco plantation, would have been able to have its own dock. Maybe this was it right here. Who knows? And the ships would have been able to sail right up, even though this is called Milburn Creek. It's not really a creek. Look, even today, everybody's got their own dock, right? And so that's just kind of goes to show you that if you wanted to, you could just put a little dock out, and the ships could just sail right up, which is a big part of what's makes this different. Okay, last one in the south, just across the little river there, we have a larger plantation. And let's go into 3D mode and kind of zoom in on it a little bit. Not a whole lot of 3 dimensions. It's mostly flat. Can we zoom in a little bit? Yeah, so this would have been, and then you can see here too, this would have been like a straight line. The forest has grown back, a straight line down to where they would have just loaded up their crops. Let's take a look at the images real quick before we head up to New England. Yeah, so this is the plantation that housed 4 generations of the Lee family of Virginia. I haven't done enough research to know if that's the same Robert E. Lee family from the Civil War, but I know there was a very um, long presence of Lees in Virginia, very famous, wealthy family. And so it kind of goes to show you that the impact on the culture, right? If you have these large plantations with lots of enslaved laborers, they have these big houses out there in the woods by themselves, on their own plantation. Everything is kind of like a small town. And then it's very fancy when you get inside and you can see these are very wealthy people that own all this land and all these slaves. Okay. Next up, let's head to the north. Bye bye, southern colonies. Hello. Oh, wow, I zoomed right in there. So we're going to be on Rhode Island to start off with. And I'll show you some pictures. This is what the coastline looks like, right? This is an old lighthouse that was trying to protect ships, don't run into the rocks. You can see, it's kind of hard to just bring a ship and just dock it here. If you tried to dock it, you would lose your ship. And it kind of shows you it's a little more hilly here as well. Oh, we don't need to see you swimming, sir. um, Let me zoom out just a little bit. Pop into 3D mode, but zoom out so you can see we're coming into uh, a river in Rhode Island, but already you can kind of tell that it's different. It's got more large towns here because they would have had to have found a place where it was safe to dock the ships and then build a town around that. Next one was the Plymouth grist mill. So another thing that was going on here was that people would bring their goods uh, from their little farms, and they would bring it to a grist mill like this, maybe, where they were using water power from this little stream to grind up their corn, and use it for bread or whatever. But you can see there's like a little bit more hills here, right? And this like little town brook, is kind of like a little rushing river almost. So here's what the grist mill would have looked like. Um, well, that's just weird. Yeah, here you can kind of see it. So this rushing water is powering the water mill. Last up, we're going to take one look at the big city, the big one. It's Boston. And so we're going to zoom in there. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's kind of disconcerting. Let me start by zooming out just a little bit, pop it into 3D mode. So here you can see a really, really big town has built up, right, in Boston. But this is a very historic town. It's very old. And this was a center of trade for much of the New England colonies. The ships would have sailed up into, where are we, Cape Cod, somewhere near Cape Cod. Um, and you can see these rocky islands that they would have had to try and avoid, and they would get in and they would dock. Once they found a safe harbor, they would dock there, and they would have gone to a place like this, Faneuil Hall. This is where they would have traded and paid taxes and stuff like that. It's still there, and it was there during the Revolution, which is pretty wild. Um, and let's do one last thing, which would be to fly to it and fly around. So this was if we were flying into what would have been very old part of Boston, right there. Pause it and zoom in a little bit. And so actually right next to it, this great hall was a really big market. And so these were, they were trading things from that they were making here in the colonies, but also things from as far away as India, right? The tea that was coming in that made the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party, if you're aware of that part of U.S. history, would have happened right down here on the Long Wharf. And so this is the end of the Long Wharf. It's been built up years and years, but it would have gone from Faneuil Hall, out into the water. Okay, so hopefully this helps to give a visual of why these colonies developed in different ways. And the challenge to think about is the connection between the geography, right? The types of planting they were doing, types of agriculture they were getting involved in, and then how that had an impact on the culture and the society. Um, it would have developed more of a class-based system here, where you have very, very wealthy people and very, very poor, in some cases enslaved people. Whereas in the northern colony, they had more towns. There was more religion. So on the one hand, they had more kind of industry and trade, but on the other hand, they also had more um, kind of religious, passion and fervor as well. So we're going to look into this week, and we hope you have fun with it. Again, the idea is the connection between the place. So the standard that we're focusing on is the connection between the place and identity. So the physical characteristics of a place, like its geography, and then the culture or the social characteristics of the community that developed. All right. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.